Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Oneness Junkie podcast, hosted by me, Lydia Smith, a self-proclaimed Oneness Junkie. Oneness Junkie is a place to be inspired, encouraged, and supported. Learn from the individuals who are working to make the world a better place. Let's meet today's guest. Hello, everybody. It's Lydia. And today I'm here with a returning guest. I'm so excited to reintroduce y'all to Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Lydia. Thank you so much for having me. I love being
Yes,
here.
it's good to see you. I have to tell the audience that I may accidentally call her Michelle because I feel like she's a friend now instead of Dr. Dawson.
You are welcome to call me Michelle.
Okay, y'all, for all intents and purposes, her name is Dr. Dawson, but I may call her Michelle. So y'all, everyone else has to call her Dr. Dawson. Anyway, it's great to see you again. I had you on the show early on, like in November.
Yes.
It seems like it felt like November. Was it?
It was November. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow. That's a while back.
It was one of your first ones.
I know.
It's so fun.
I know. I'm so glad you wanted to come back. So thanks. I'm excited about the topic today. I do want to give a little bit of a intro for anyone who didn't listen to our first episode. I just want to say that I met Dr. Dawson by watching a show on Amazon Prime called Emotion 2.0, and she was one of the speakers and presenters in the movie, and I just really connected with her and what she was talking about and was drawn to her and just Googled her and reached out through her website and found her. And she was at that time still taking clients. So we worked together for a couple of months and I worked on some issues with her. And she basically does a type of therapy. Do you recall healing a therapy?
Yeah, I call it a modality.
Modality. Okay. So a modality of, working, healing, working on yourself. Called Recall Healing. And just in a nutshell, I'll let Dr. Dawson explain, what Recall Healing. So people have a context who didn't listen to the previous episode, and then we'll dive in.
Okay, so I'll give you the elevator version of Recall Healing.
The elevator pitch.
So, because I could go on forever about it.
I know.
It is hard to do like that little spiel, So, but in any case, Recall Healing, I call it a modality because it uses tools. I just educate people on how to look at their life a little bit differently. It really boils down to changing the perspective, even about what we're going to talk about today. When we change the perspective, we can shift a lot of things. When we have an understanding about why we have certain things going on in our body, that can allow that body, that symptom, the issue in our body to shift and to change. So we look at a person's life experiences, what we call the project purpose, which is the 18 months before a child is born, their pregnancy, their birth, and the whole first year of life. And we look at the ancestors, about who we line up with, who by birth order number and our names and all of this. And that gives us insight as to where to look and some of the things that we might be carrying for our ancestors that we thought were just ours, but they end up showing up in our lives. So,
yeah. And from having gone through that with you, I would say that it really is like an opportunity for clarity. Once you go dig a little deeper, it's really just an opportunity to get clear, have understanding. Once you have understanding, it's a lot easier to maybe accept and release something that might be bothering you, because it's all about naming it, basically.
Right. It really is. 80% is about awareness. So when you change the perspective, you're bringing in a new awareness anyway. Sometimes we have to process that and work through it, and so that we can be a little bit more at peace about it. But 80% is about just the awareness. 20% is what we do with that awareness.
Yeah, it was really neat. I remember, because I'm the fourth child, that I lined up with my first sister, and my mom was a firstborn. So I lined up with her. And, when you explained that to me, it kind of all made sense about the way I feel connected to those people in my family. And, even other grandmothers or aunts or whatever, was interesting, to
I
feel
like that part. It's fascinating because it does, like you said, just having that new little awareness. That totally makes sense why I would feel more like them or really drawn
or connected, right?
Connected and like their soul sister, something like this. And there's why in our perspective in Western world, we don't look at those kinds of things, but there is this invisible loyalty that we carry. And so it's like the way I imagine it is like just these invisible threads that we're in link with, almost a little like a spider web. So sometimes that can feel really nasty, or it can be quite beautiful. If you look at a spider web, it's so intricate and just so really beautiful. But when you walk into it, it feels nasty. So when there's this unfinished business from above, it really can be this nasty thing that we're involved in. So it's
well, and I want to tell the audience too that a lot of the focus of what the work does, it looks at actual people or situations where there's like an actual health crisis. So this really translates to something that's manifesting in your life. Like a cancer or a boil or a back pain or, anything that could be considered like a medical manifestation, right? A health manifestation. And you can kind of help track back where you really want to go is like get to the root of where that could be getting generated from so that you can help heal. Because if you don't really have all those kinds of components understood, it may not create healing, right? If it's kind of unconscious.
Absolutely.
Like the medicine doesn't even work, right?
Absolutely. The medicine doesn't work. The supplements don't work. That modality doesn't work because your body believes that it still needs it and it doesn't understand that you understand. And so it is in finding the root and the why. We definitely use the biology, but also you can look at broken marriages and you can look at those kinds of aspects as to how they have been handed down in the family clan. And so it can be behaviors. It can be pretty much anything that's showing up. And we don't focus on the good because the good is, it's awesome, but we don't really focus on that. We look at the challenging, the traumatic, the painful,
what's not working,
what hasn't worked, where we have felt traumatized or literally or figuratively been traumatized. And, a lot of times people think of like, oh, well, war. Well, war can be true. And especially our friends in Ukraine right now and Russia and who are affected by this, or it can be something that is this day in and day out hard thing that you're dealing with, a special needs child, an alcoholic situation, an addiction, these kinds of things
can be a troubled teenager.
Absolutely. Like anything like this and if you're spinning your wheels about it, that's what, and this brings us to our topic. That is secret suffering, and that can lead to a cancer or something serious in the body if it's not addressed,
especially over time, right? It's like it's the chronic aspect of it, right? That creates it. So let's tell the audience. So we just said the name of our subject today that we're talking about, it's titled Secret Suffering. And I learned this term working with Dr. Dawson, and I asked Dr. Dawson if she would go ahead and kind of define it and give it a context so that as we continue to talk about secret suffering today, the audience understands the foundation of which we're talking about. And then we're going to talk about how it manifests, what are the different types of secret suffering you can find in your life, and where have you secretly suffered? Ask yourself. And then we're going to talk about ways to manage it and, pull out from it if you can. Right. So do you want to go ahead and define?
Okay. Yeah. So secret suffering is anything in our life that bothers us, hurts us, challenges us, and we don't necessarily talk about it, or we don't talk about it to the extent, and we don't have peace about it. So sometimes we talk about things, but we're not at peace about it. So it's that extra bonus is that added component is the peace. Whatever you're not at peace about that is going on in your life, that leads to secret suffering and ultimately to something transpiring in the body.
Right. And I'm just going to dive in and give my personal example. The reason I can talk about this is because I believe I lived, this experience where I feel like I was secretly suffering, which is one of the reasons that I reached out to you, because I, had, based on a trauma that I had experienced when I was about 21 years old, I had thought that I had worked through it. I thought that I had gotten resolution from it. I thought I had come to terms with it. I had done therapy about it. I had worked on it. I had gotten, completion. Those are all the things I thought, I had. But I was still like, something was keeping me from joy. I didn't have the joy that I thought I wanted and really worked towards, because I did a lot of positive, law of attraction and, a lot of spiritual things that, where you focus on living in your joy. And I knew I was doing all the actions, but I didn't have what I would feel like as like an authentic joy. And I knew that it wasn't where it could be. So that's what I reached out to you for. And really what I had identified is that when I had experienced, for some of you who have listened to previous episodes, basically my eldest sister committed suicide, and she chose to create an accident while I was standing next to her. And she basically, accidentally, using my finger quotes, made herself fall off of a building right when I was standing there. And it was, very traumatic. It was very, sad and scary. And frankly, I wasn't that thrilled that she chose to do that while I was there. I mean, it's one thing for her to want to end her life, but why did she have to involve me? Why did I have to be there for her? And I had taken the martyr role, like, oh, she needed me, like this was a 30-year ago experience. So I was like, oh, she needed me, poor thing, she was mentally ill, whatever. Like I was justifying why it had to happen that way and why she needed me there, just to give myself some sense of like, why, because I think I needed a why, why did this have to happen in my life, and, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to give myself like the martyr. Oh, I needed to be there for her. Cause then I was sacrificing myself for someone else's life. And that stole my joy, literally. And I didn't realize it. I didn't really recognize it until we did some work together and, identified a lot of different things about that. But in that understanding, I recognized how much of the 30 years I had secretly suffered, because there was just this peace in my spirit and my body that would not allow me to experience authentic joy, because I had had this experience in my life. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how could I really have joy again? Because I'm not pure, it's not like a pure joy. It's like a tainted joy, right? Mm-hmm. And I actually learned that you could contextualize your traumas and your experiences, and you can regain the joy. It's all kind of a process that you have to go through, but it's possible. And one of the reasons that I want to talk about this, topic and also share it with the world is that I think there's a lot of people out there secretly suffering for different reasons. And we're going to talk about ways people secret suffer. But I also think that people can find joy again and can have joy again, even when they've, let's ping pong. If you go through a divorce, that's you were saying that's a real painful place for people to come from.
Right.
Like my sister, the one that committed suicide, she was raped, I don't think she could ever have felt like she could have her joy back after being raped. And I know a lot of people are raped out there in the world. So let's think of ways that people may have experienced something in there secretly.
Well, I think like the stress of the daily life, which you probably heard me say, a few hundred times, but really like that day in, day out stress of, like, for instance, many times women are asked to do everything in the house, and cook and clean and make sure that the kids are okay and do the laundry and go to work and make sure that dinner
and have the babies,
and raise the babies without the real support of a husband. Well, she suffers. But she may feel that, well, I made this choice. I love my husband. Of course, this is, what I want.
This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what all women do because of the lineage.
Exactly.
What did my mother do?
That we tell ourselves, keep a stiff upper lip. Don't, come on,
don't complain.
Put your big girl panties on and make sure that you're doing what you need to do.
People have it worse than you do.
Lots of people have it worse than you do. What is, come on. That is where, so then we devalue the fact that we feel badly about this, whatever it is, whatever that may be, doing all the work, being in a terrible job, being in a not so great relationship, not having support from your family, from your parents, from your siblings, having children that are having addictions or stress or special needs. Like all of these places are places where people suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And anything can be suffering.
Money, but also we were talking about careers and jobs. I mean, I think about people who go to school for lawyers or doctors who put a big investment in their education and then they decide they hate it.
What?
I don't really like this, but I have to do it because I just spent 12 years studying to be a doctor, and then they just suffer through it. Like, this is my calling.
Well, right? And that's the same for marriages, and then I shared with you, like in the process of writing a book and just really understanding about how many people will stay in a marriage because they said till death do we part, which I'm not degrading to making a vow. It's just that when you're 20 years old, it's very different than as when you're 30 and 40 and 50 and 60. And sometimes the people that we choose at 20 are not the best people for who we are as people or who we are becoming. And, and then there's not the lifting each other up and it's like oftentimes there's even competition between couples and it's just that adds to the suffering of an individual. And then people don't talk about it. They don't talk about it with their spouse. They don't talk about it at all. And so that's where the brain will ultimately take over.
Yes, absolutely. There are so many different ways that people do suffer. And tell us a little bit about your book. What are you talking about in your book?
So in my book, I am talking about just that aspect of till death do we part does not mean until my marriage kills me. Because so many times we get into marriages and we stay in the marriage because we think, oh, I made the commitment until death do we part. But then you end up sacrificing your life for that marriage. And I really, and especially coming from Christian background and having this, this is what the vow is when you get married in Christian marriages. And so I really don't think that God really wants you to die for the marriage. And so I think that we have to learn how real marriage is all about. what it's all about, and how to be life-giving to each other, and how to lift each other up, and how to, be that total cheerleader for, our partner. And sometimes that might mean that it's not a good fit and we shouldn't be together.
Right. I love what have you ever read any of his books, Gary Zukav books?
Oh yeah, I love Gary.
Yeah, me too. And I always resonated with his message about a spiritual partnership where two people are coming together for the growth of each individual. And when you can like hold that space for each person in the relationship and y'all both are on that same page, then you kind of know, like, it's not about you, right? You're just there like as a support and sounding board, which you kind of mentioned, for each other to evolve, and as long as you can do it together, then it's a good alignment.
Yeah, because that really is key, especially in marriage. It's like it takes two people to make a marriage work. It takes two people to stay in it and be committed. And it is a commitment to continuing to work on ourselves. And that is so, it's because so many times our one finger is pointed at somebody else, so three are pointed back at us. And so we do have to take some responsibility and do our own work. And what does that look like for each person? That, that is up to that person to really take a look at. But it's
interesting because sometimes you end up getting attracted to the person like magnetically because they do the dance with you, the dance that you need. And so like, oh, I'm the victim and oh, I'm the perpetrator. And then like that marriage works until the victim realizes he or she doesn't want to be a victim anymore. And then all of a sudden the dynamic.
Right. And then there's no more persecutor, savior, victim. There's you can't.
Right. And so like it works until someone wakes up, and snaps out of it.
Right. And so what we say in my work is that we're as sick as our secrets are.
Oh, yeah.
So those aspects of what we suffer for, what we don't want to address, because when a person gets a cancer or something very serious, we got to look at what's going on in their life that would manifest a cancer. And the cancer is simply a metabolic disharmony in the body. And so if there's disharmony in our network and in our relationships, at our work, in our home, that's all going to lead to disharmony in the body.
Yeah. And just the whole, like, where you came from and, your lineage and how connected you are to your nuclear family, like if all of that, if you came from dysfunction, but you love your family, it's really hard to get separated from that toxic environment if that's the way the family operates.
For sure.
What are you going to do? Leave us?
Yeah. And find that balance. And I say, nobody gives you a high five for setting boundaries. And when you start to do healthier things for yourself, and especially in the midst of an unhealthy family, they're not going to give you a high five. They're going to tell you that you've changed or you've joined a cult or
who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are? That's when you really are shifting and changing and you're growing. And so energetically, you don't vibrate at the same energetic level that you once did with your family, with your friends. Sometimes it is an outgrowing of a friendship, and that can be painful too. So at any stage, it can be painful. And so, but yeah, that whole secret suffering.
I know. And sometimes you, like in certain cases, like you just said friendship, and, you could have like a 30-year long friendship, but, if the friendship hasn't evolved or it's not, in a healthy place, and, you're just putting up with, I actually had a situation where I just kept holding on for the relationship to, become better, to evolve to a better place because of the longevity. But at some point, I think I just got exhausted with waiting for it to shift. And, even though the parties were working on themselves, it never seemed to really shift,
Well,
so.
and I do think it's interesting to think about those friendships that you've had for 30, 40 years, because, you may have, I know for myself recently, lost a friend of 40 years. And it's crazy because I was a little girl when, and so he was a mentor, a friend, and so I've had to really work on that, because it's also really hard to not blame yourself. Like, what's wrong with me? Why is this here? And it was a nice reminder that my husband said, Michelle, you outgrew him a long time ago, but he never wanted to really do more work on himself. And so if you don't shift
it
together,
gets very out of balance, right?
It does. It ends
then
up
you're just out of the frequency.
Yeah. And so it doesn't work anymore. And it's almost like it ends up becoming the polarities of the magnet where you repel each other. And that's sometimes what happens in families as well. So it is not always an easy thing, but what I really truly believe is that as you continue to do the work, that those people that are not so healthy for you they're more in a toxic arena, that they sort of begin to fall by the wayside, and that you do call in people that are much healthier. And like you said, sometimes they'll reflect what we need to work on, and other times they'll reflect how much we have done. And that's a really beautiful thing when you realize, oh my gosh, like I'm in this place and I'm not suffering in this relationship or in this, or, in my friendships. And I only have people that lift me up and who want to be in my arena now. If you don't want to, it's okay. I give you a blessing and send you on your way, but
right. And I do believe in, especially if you're the one who's just setting that boundary or just choosing that it's no longer working for you, you can still love the person. You can still want the best for them. You can still choose positively for them to have a great experience. And like that's how you release it, instead of, what I was met with was, the other party was, so angry and frustrated and mad that they had to unfriend me, like on social media, and I'm thinking, I'm glad I'm not in that place that I have to completely unfriend, somebody just because I know we're not currently in alignment. I mean, I had hope that in the future something would shift, and that there would be a new level of understanding, but that just shows me the maturity level of the person who can't handle, reality and has to, lock it in and do drastic things.
Totally. I absolutely agree.
When you have to have drastic measures, it's because you're out of control in your own sense of self.
Yeah, absolutely. And so those are the areas that even that can cause suffering. And even if you know that that is not a healthy relationship anymore, and but you love that person, you've cared about that person.
Yeah.
It's still challenging to let go. So to honor yourself and allow yourself to mourn the loss, it's really, and it's really in talking about it and processing it so that you can help get it out of your body, out of your tissues. So, Lydia, because you've done so much beautiful work, but, however that looks for the individual, like it can be writing, it can be dancing. It's like, oh, I'm so frustrated because
breath work, right?
Breath work. And, like when a person is frustrated, this is what leads to depression, frustration in the territory. And, we hear this, this is really like those, oh, I'm frustrated. We talked a little bit. Oh, I'm so frustrated. Well, it's the relationship. or I haven't grown, or I need to do some work on myself. What is coming up right now that I need to address? And so getting out in nature and walking and talking, and I love your posts, and like just what I see, nature and the and even your fireplace and the butterflies is awesome. So I think that those kinds of things are so fantastic, but to really underneath really honor the fact, like, I'm really suffering, I'm really at a loss, I'm really sad about this, because just by owning that can allow the suffering to be lifted at least a percentage.
Yeah. And I venture to say that there was suffering in the experience of the friendship, which caused the completion of it. Right. So there was suffering before. Right. It's just there's a different level of suffering after. Right. Mm-hmm. This is like an active suffering before, because it's actively participating and still continuing. When you decide to name it, claim it, and talk about it, and then you both decide, I guess this isn't working, let's do something different. It's a different level it's more like a grieving, like what wasn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And sometimes we don't even get the closure because we can't really talk to the person about it.
If people aren't comfortable talking.
So energetically different than and so you can't even talk about it. It's sort of crazy, but that's, it's like we're surrounded by those kinds of things all the time. But I think we typically try to brush it under the carpet and keep going so that we don't have to be in pain about it.
Yeah. Let's talk about how to so we talked about ways that people suffer and all the different things that can happen, like the physical, medical, health issues, including depression, mental health, physical health issues that can happen from secret suffering. And it's a great reminder that you can get as sick as your secrets. So it's really good to get all that, out. So you really need to kind of find people, hire people, group, whatever, that you can, have these kinds of conversations with, so that people have a way of an outlet, right, to work through that. So let's talk about, how do people work through once they identify they have secret suffering, how do you get out of that well? Like dig yourself out of that hole.
Like I said, 80% is about the awareness. And so like, just by recognizing, I'm really suffering for this marriage or this job or this kid or whatever it may be. So doing that. And then, like I said about getting it out, like really either write or journal, talk to a friend from the depth of pain. And then if that friend knows you well, you really can have these conversations where they can point out to you, well, remember when this happened, and remember when this happened, because you want to keep going. Like, where does this original? So sometimes when you're in the thick of it, in the marriage, all you can see is the marriage, but really the root is mom and dad, about how I felt with mom and dad. So we will always want to go to the root. So it's never about what's just happening right now. So we can use our age to divide in half and half and half. And there's an infinite number of patterns that we can find, but that's one way. We look at our ancestors to see who we lined up with, what were their stories. Am I experiencing certain things that my ancestors did? And is that a repeating story? Because then just naming it, oh, this belonged to my ancestors, and it hurts. And I imagine they were hurt too. And today I don't have to carry this. So we use the Ho'oponopono technique of the Hawaiian forgiveness, of cleansing and making things right. And literally just say, you take 100% responsibility, say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you for this, for whatever this might be. Mm-hmm. And it's a way to cleanse it. So we use these little techniques and, ways to look at things in life. And that is helpful to really get to the root and create something new for yourself. I say one of my taglines is honor the past, live in the present, and create the future. And so the way to honor the past is really to own that we've had pain and suffering, and that we really are, and it's like we have choices, and now we have choices again, that we can make something different for our lives. And we're not a victim of the circumstances any longer. Then we live in the present, really one day at a time, breathing and accessing just today. That creates a whole new future, a whole new area of peace and harmony within just living day to day.
Mm-hmm. And I like to say that when we heal ourselves, I say we heal the world, but also when we heal ourselves, we heal our relationships. And we were talking before we hit record, and we were saying that if you don't do the work when you identify it, you're just going, like we were talking about marriages and relationships, you're just going to carry you and all your stuff into your next relationship. So make the time investment, if it's a financial investment, like you're doing this work for your life, for you. You're not doing it for your future husband, or wife. They're just the beneficiary. You're the one who gets to live with the joy of knowing you cleared your stuff and you worked on your stuff, and now you're actually authentically happy. And it just carries the relationship to a whole nother level, right?
Absolutely. And that's the beautiful thing. So as you work on you, sometimes people don't see their value. And so that's hard. But oftentimes I find that when people have children, that knowing that when they do this work, it actually clears their whole family. So even if you don't have children, it helps with nieces and nephews and parents and siblings and future generations. Just by doing your own work, it clears all of that. And so that's a motivation. Until you can see your own worth and value, borrow from what other people see in you.
How it'll affect others, right?
Yes.
If you're not so worried about how it's going to affect you, at least you probably care about how it affects others.
Yeah. And so you have potential to have that impact on other people by the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And thank God there's people out there like you and your team. You're training people now, aren't you? To be more, this work is getting stronger in the US now, right?
It is stronger in the US, stronger worldwide. It's pretty amazing to see it unfold. And so, yes, I get to train people and work with people. It's really an honor.
Yeah, good. Well, I know that this was a quickie and we're good, right? You've got stuff to do. You're on the East Coast, so it's already dinner time.
My husband's son is coming, so this is
gotta get it together.
Today.
Well, I know that we're gonna have you back. We already have that opportunity in line. So I just so thank you. I love your energy and your time, and I appreciate you wanting to get on and talk about what I call, conscious conversations that are really difficult and challenging. But the truth is, we know that everyone that's out there has experienced or is experiencing, these difficult times. And I just want to bring them to the forefront and have people think about that there is a possibility for healing, happiness, and joy on the other side of the suffering.
Absolutely. And I just love what you're doing. And I'm super happy to be a part of the journey and the team, and to bring this hopeful message that there really is differences that can be just embraced in our life, so that we can be different and we can choose different for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, good luck writing your book, and keep us posted when that's actually out. Do you have a deadline for yourself of when you want to get that ready?
Yes. So I'm in the process of doing 4, but 1 is for sure going to be done this week.
You're writing 4 books.
I have 4 books in the making, like little bit here. I've done like more than half on some, and then a little bit that I've started. And so 1 is going to be done this year.
You're a multitasker.
That's it. So
you're definitely busy. Anyway, well, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Lydia. Me too. Can't wait.
Yeah. Okay.
See you next time.
All right. Bye-bye. We've reached the end of this episode. If you'd like to continue with this inspirational journey, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. If you are a self-proclaimed oneness junkie, get yourself a t-shirt and spread the message of oneness in your community. And finally, if you have a story to share or know someone that should be a guest on this podcast, contact us at onenessjunkie.com. See you next time. And remember, when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Compassion starts with you and me.